Welcome to Season 2 of the Face to Face Ministries podcast. I am Melinda Wilson.
And I'm Kathy Little. Thank you so much for joining us as we introduce you to ministries and leaders from around the globe who have said yes to the Isaiah 61 mandate to heal the brokenhearted and set the captives free, helping people to step into who they were always meant to be.
And for more information about us, please visit our website, face2faceministries.org. That's all one word, no spaces, no numbers, and no caps. And please follow us on our social media platforms, face2faceministries.org on Facebook and on Instagram, face2facemin.
Welcome to today's episode. We are so happy you're here. Well, we're back.
Yeah, we are. Aren't you glad? Yay. I know. No, I'm just kidding. I'm glad to episode 83.
Man, we are really getting up there. We're like 60,000 downloads, man. It's like, come on, this is so good. And you know, we're doing this for you guys, but if it weren't for you listening and letting us know, and I mean, we've had people starting to let us know via email, and people that are in our face-to-face heart healing network we talked about last week, we'll talk about that again, who are there because of the podcast. It's really good to know that what we're doing is making a difference and people are listening, and people are sharing testimonies about how this has really impacted them. And now, this is so fun because we've had people that have been listening to the podcast and then they're joining into the face-to-face heart healing network and connecting with us. And then we've had some trainings and live things that we've done. And so actually, you know, you don't have to just be a listener. You can actually be connected to us, and we can grow together in community, because that's what our face-to-face heart healing network is all about.
Yes, and this network, I mean, it's growing, it's exciting. It's about training, equipping, providing resources, and providing community. A place where we can grow together, learn. And again, we are building this for you.
Yes.
We have heard what you need, and that's what we're providing.
Yeah.
And so it's so exciting. We mentioned last week that we've recently launched the premium membership site where there's just some amazing things happening.
Wow, we're so excited about it. We've been building toward the premium network for a long time. It's a subscription. You can go in, actually, if you pay for a year, you get 2 months free, or you can pay monthly, and you can cancel at any time. If at any time
You're
you feel like,
in.
if you feel like, hey, not really sure I'm liking this, it's no big deal. It's like, hey, I'm going to pause my subscription or cancel my subscription, then you can come back in later. No big deal. We do that because we're that confident that you're going to really love the value. And we've interviewed a lot of amazing, high-powered people in this arena, and we have relationship with them because all those interviews in season 1 were done in person, not just face-to-face, but in person, face-to-face, and filmed. And that's one of the things that we're actually releasing in the premium network is the videos of these interviews. But because of the relationship that we have with them, we've been able to ask them to come into the premium network and do some trainings. We're going to have monthly master classes with different guests or different topics we're going to tackle. We're also going to have a way for you to practice some of the Emmanuel tools that we're going to be teaching along the way. And we're going to be looking into how to create some small group atmosphere for interaction. You can always connect with people who are near you on the network. And again, this is not your typical social media. This is its own platform. There's no distractions. There's no noise. You're in there with people who are just like you, who are going after heart healing, whether they're brand new to the topic, whether they just want it for themselves, or they want to be trained, or they want additional tools, or they just want to have a place to practice, or maybe they just want to be friends with people who are on the same journey. This is the place to go, the Face-to-Face Heart Healing Network. It's completely free for you to join the network. Just go to our website, face2faceministries.org, and you'll be able to see it right there on the very homepage, very top of the homepage. Click in there, start a username, password, and you're in, and then you can see the other options. We've got the bundle of the founders videos with the premium network, which is a monthly subscription, or like I said, pay for a year, get 2 months free, cancel anytime, no obligation.
And as we've mentioned, things are opening up again, and we're doing in-person that's live, like we can actually see you, make eye contact with you, Emmanuel approach trainings. And these are transformational. And, you know, this is not just about, well, I don't really want to be a prayer minister, or my church doesn't have a healing ministry, or that's okay. When we do the basic training, this is all about developing deeper intimacy with Jesus, learning brain skills, relational skills. How do I connect with God? How do I connect with Jesus in a more intimate way that's going to be life transformational? And I can use this with my friends, my family, not just as a prayer minister, but just as a friend, as a mom, as a dad, as a sister, brother. So let us know, reach out to us. We come to you. We're so excited. And we love being in person. And for those, again, for those of you who can't bring us in person, we do have a basic level 1 training.
A very abbreviated one.
It's an abbreviated, it's really simple tools, but we are going to be also offering a longer version that's really effective and powerful.
So our guest today, this is part 2 with Michel Hendricks, who co-wrote a book with Jim Wilder called The Other Half of Church. And you'll start to hear, we've been talking about the face-to-face network here, but you're going to hear in more of this conversation with Michel why this context is so important, the community aspect, why it's important to understand how to build joy, how to stay relational. This is emotional maturity. This is an ability to really have more maturity, healthy relationships, healthy connections, why they're so important, how to pursue them. So the things that he's talking about, all of those concepts are things that we're about and trying to incorporate and build into the face-to-face network here. So we're very excited about introducing more of Michel's content to you and more of this conversation. And I think you're going to really enjoy the second half of our conversation with him.
Yeah.
So without any more delay, this is Michel.
So good.
And two.
And just a little bit more on joy, because I really focus on that in the Emmanuel teaching in both the basic and intermediate, because it's that attunement, it's the knowing God is happy to be with us. And of course, we haven't even said the definition of joy, knowing that someone's happy to be with you. And I was just reading one of the highlighted paragraphs I have, said that different people feel God's joy in different ways. I'm talking about Michel here, who we're talking to. What is important is that we're aware of something, whether it's butterflies or that warm sensation, and we have to actually be aware of that. Like we're saying, is that in fact, when I teach, I often just, hey, let's just take some deep breaths and, feel where your back is on the chair. And Michel, not only is it sometimes frowned upon in the church, but do you think too that it's just our society that we're in such a rush all the time that we're not connected to what's going on in our body?
Yeah, this left brain imbalance is not just in the church. It's a cultural trend, larger cultural trend. It's an example of an area where the church followed the culture the last 500 years rather than maintaining its distinctive flavor, because it's very, very obvious from Scripture that the relational aspects of our faith and our connection to each other, our connection to our bodies, all this kind of connection is very much what we see in Scripture as I think 1 Corinthians 13, where Paul just says, without love, without being well connected together, then everything else falls apart. So concentrate on that first. But again, I like what you said, where you have clients sit in their chair and feel their toes, feel their legs, feel their back against the chair. You're essentially training a person to start to come back into connection with their bodies.
Yeah.
And this needs to be something we regularly do in church. We teach people that. Some people are already fairly connected, so they learn real quick. Other people are very disconnected, and it'll take a fairly significant amount of work to get them back in their bodies. That should be considered as normal training and experience that people need as they become Christians, as learning how to read the Bible. We teach them how to read Scripture, and we teach them how to live in their bodies. And so that's the other half of church. Let's do both of those. Let's not throw the other one out. Let's do both and.
Yeah. I this is again back to the joy, but there's a dog that I dearly love that is the true epitome of joy. If you were to look at her in her body and her emotions, and she is always happy to be with me. In fact, I've explained, I said, this dog, her whole body, she can't contain herself. Like her whole body wags, not just her tail. And I mean, she's like moaning and screaming in joy, if a dog can scream. And I got to say, it's just me. In fact, her owner is that she doesn't respond this way to anybody else. But you know what? Part of that is that I respond that way to her. And she said, I think that you give her freedom to allow herself to express herself fully. And you could almost be talking about a person in that, but she allows herself, her whole body. And of course, what does that do to me? I am just filled with absolute joy. I feel a tingling in my body, and I can feel it as I think about it now. I can feel how excited I am when I'm with this dog. And even eye contact, I don't know if, I know it's not in the book, but even eye contact with a dog and that joy that is exchanged. And it's a two-way street here. It's like, I'm happy to be with you. You're happy to be with me. And I call it a tennis match of joy. I've said that in talking about when, and it is quicker than we can even think about, but how can it not affect us, body, mind, soul, spirit? And it's not just oh yes, Jesus, it gets to be this kind of esoteric, philosophical thing of his presence. And it's this spiritual thing, but it's actually a full brain, full body experience. And Michael, let's just address that for a second, because some people may hear me and they've listened to this podcast enough to know that I'm pretty emotive and I'm very expressive. And I am a very passionate person. And people say that, oh, Melinda, you make me feel so good to be with you, because I was just doing this naturally. But what about people who are not as emotive or expressive as I am? And and that's okay. And is it possible to still experience that joy of being glad to be together, even if, your whole body doesn't wag when you see, when you see somebody, or they're not, is that still possible if someone's not so emotive or expressive?
Yeah, I think we've interpreted people who are less emotive as being, that's just part of who they are. They're just wired that way. Mm-hmm. And, but often, when, just like your dog, young infants, when they go into an emotion, their whole body goes into that emotion, a toddler.
Mm-hmm.
When they're sad, their whole body is sad. And when they're angry, their whole body is angry. When they're ashamed, you could even block their head with your hand and just see their body, and you could tell they're ashamed. Everything is ashamed. And this is really something we learn over time from our environment, from our caregivers, from our communities, growing up in the jungle of elementary school, middle school, high school, that there are times when it's just not safe to show all that we're feeling. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Or maybe our parents don't show certain emotions, and it's subtly taught to you, well, those emotions are not accepted here. These other emotions are fine. And so over time, we start incorporating that into our makeup, into our character, into our spontaneous behavior. Oftentimes there's a very good reason, though. At the time, it wasn't safe. Fully you there. Yeah. So when we go into this training, you treat people with great, great compassion. If there's someone who has a really hard time sensing their bodies, or really hard time going into emotion, there's a good reason there. And we need to look at them with the same compassion that Jesus looks at them, and let them go at their pace. This is not some sort of contest or competition. All of those things are very anti-love, anti-connection. One of the biggest factors that breeds this attachment and this love characteristic in our communities is when we fully are free to share our weaknesses. And we know that our weaknesses will be received with tenderness and love and compassion. And it won't be used for making fun of, or for pressuring, or using in some sort of narcissistic way for me to gain an advantage over you. All those things we've experienced in life, right? But the Christian community needs to be a place, and this is another right brain loving development where we are free to share our weaknesses with people and know that we'll receive attunement, we'll receive kindness and compassion. And that's the environment we create that allows people to start to awaken to their bodies, awaken to their emotions. And it's very, very freeing, but it needs to be done with great wisdom, with good eldership, protecting people and not pushing them beyond what they're comfortable. And so there's just a lot going on there, but that's the direction I believe we need to go in our churches.
Yeah, that kind of segues into a question I would love. I know we want people to read this book, okay? This book is really, really important, especially if you're involved in any way, shape, or form in church leadership. But Michael, what are some of the practical things that you bring out in the book that help us transition into that other half of church? What are some of the practical things that could be done in that setting to help that happen?
So that's the exact question I asked Jim Wilder when he started talking about character being our spontaneous reactions to our surroundings changes. Those spontaneous reactions we don't have control over directly in our willpower. And so I said that question, well, if I don't have direct control over it, then how do I change it? If I don't have, it's not under my willpower. And he said, well, that's when he started talking about joy. He says the thing your brain wants more than any other thing is joy. And any kind of character change starts with us building more joy into our lives and into our communities. And so I said, well, how do you do that? And he said, well, one example is, and he just had me close my eyes, and he says, think of a memory when you were feeling very grateful for something, a grateful memory you have. It can be recently or a long time ago, or it doesn't matter. And he says, in that you've kind of felt a connection with Jesus in that feeling, in that memory. And so I sat there and I thought of a time I was in Colorado and I saw a red-tailed hawk on the top of a ponderosa pine tree. It was one of those moments where just time froze, and it was just so beautiful. It was kind of windy, and I could see the wind ruffling the feathers of the neck of the hawk. And it just like time froze for 10 seconds. And I just looked at it and felt Jesus just smiling at the beauty, like he enjoyed me enjoying his beauty, is kind of what I felt. And so after about 10 seconds, I opened my eyes and Jim said, give your memory a short title just so you can remember it. And so I said, yeah, I'll call it Red-Tailed Hawk. And he said, what did you sense that Jesus was impressing on you from that grateful memory? And I said, I felt like Jesus was just happy to share that with me and happy to be with me right now doing this memory exercise with you. And then Jim, interestingly, said, and what did you sense in your body as you went back and relived that memory? And I said, I just kind of felt a kind of a lightness and a fullness. And then he said, oh, okay, so Jesus may be communicating to you how happy he is to be with you, and you feel that almost as a lightness and a fullness. So you see what Jim's doing is he's tying all the right brain aspects of that together. And then he said, let's turn this into an exercise then. Why don't you start building a list of gratitude memories and try to get 10 or more, and then use that list to go into 5 minutes of nonverbal gratitude every day, where you're not thanking God verbally for things, and you're not thinking about the memories. You're actually reliving them. You're back in them in your memory. And you're back in front of that ponderosa pine tree, and you're seeing that hawk, and you're sensing, the smile of Jesus there, and feeling that lightness in your body, and just kind of just sitting in it. And if the memory starts fading, then go back to your list and go into another memory and just maintain that gratitude for 5 minutes. And he said that's very much like filling up the gas tank of your right brain, your relational gas tank that gives you energy to do this reconnecting and rebuilding that we want to do in the church. So basically what Jim is saying, we always start with joy. Joy is the starting point of all discipleship, all spiritual formation, all character formation. It all relies on our joy to be raising, because in the presence of low joy, there's not a lot of practices that are going to work very well.
Yeah.
So that's a practice I've done. I've done it every day. I did it this morning for 5 minutes. I do it every morning. And there's even a kind of a steroids version of that he puts us on. That's a 30-day gratitude exercise we describe in the book, where you do it 3 times a day for 30 days. And that really gives your brain almost this saturation of joy and causes kind of a circuit rewiring to the point that it's really sets you up to really absorb the joy and get on this, it's kind of like a booster on this path to the full-brained walk with Jesus.
Yeah, sounds very similar to the Emmanuel approach.
Well, yeah, I mean,
yeah.
That's right. And of course, Dr. Wilder and Dr. Carl Lehman really kind of developed that together. And then Dr. Lehman went, according to Jim Wilder, it was like, okay, you take that and run with it. And then
Train
of course, Lehman wrote a 700-page book on it, but, and has really explored that a lot further. But that's the foundation of the Emmanuel approach, is starting in that place of connection with joy. And then, Jesus, show me where you were. That can sometimes be the question. And having that, he's glad to be with us awareness. You're right, Michael. I mean, this is what I teach. It's the foundation of everything. And that way, finding that he's happy to be with me, even when I'm not with other people, if I find myself in a lonely, isolated place, or for whatever reason, then, I know that Jesus is happy to be with me, even if nobody else is. And that's key, because sometimes people aren't happy to be with us. I mean, isn't that right? Like, let's say, and I really want to segue into your chapter on Hesed, the relational glue. And a lot of people may have not heard that word, community relationships. But before we dive into that, what do we do if we lack someone else in our life that is happy to be with us? Because we're talking here and I'm thinking, I bet there's at least one person that, I don't know anyone that's happy to be with me. And that's also a legitimate thing, of whether, unhealthy family or whatever. So what do we do? And can we develop and grow joy if literally there is no one happy to be with us?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I run into that sometimes. The key to know is that Jesus is always happy to be with us. And so we can always build some joy with Jesus. And also, Jesus says if we pray anything that's according to his will, he'll give it to us. So asking Jesus to give you some friends and give you a community that has higher joy, that will raise my joy, that's a very good prayer. That's a prayer that you can say with a lot of confidence. So just ask Jesus to give, and I've done that. You ask Jesus to give you some people that are further down the road than you, some people that can demonstrate, the couple steps farther down, that you can see how this works, this higher joy life, and who they themselves will be happy to be with you. And when I became a Christian in college, I got involved with this college group, and I didn't know it was called joy then. I'd never heard it defined as what I feel, even in my body, when I can tell when someone else is happy to be with me. But I would show up to our group meetings, and I could just feel it in my body that everyone was so happy that I just arrived. And I didn't know at the time that this was fueling my brain. It was fueling my relational life, my emotional capacity. It was just really, really good for me. And I also missed it after I graduated college. I could tell there is a difference in my emotional relational makeup, since I don't have that kind of a community anymore. So I could feel it. I just didn't have words to put to it until I met Jim Wilder. And he's the one who would say, yes, we need to thrive in a high joy relationship with Jesus and a high joy community, Christian community with the people around us. That is kind of the starting point. And even Jim in his counseling practice, he stopped leading people into trauma as a counselor first. What he would have them do is have them do a month's worth of joy exercises first. And then say, come and see me once you've been doing these exercises and some of these other things I give you. And then they would show up having done those exercises for a month. And he would still, even in the sessions, start with gratitude, start with joy. And then you'd ask Jesus, what would you like to talk about today? And then Jesus would say, okay, let's go into this memory. Or Jesus might say, no, we're not going to go into any deep memory today. We're just going to enjoy each other. Because Jesus is a lot smarter than the rest of us. So put him back in the center of the counseling process, right?
Absolutely. It takes the pressure off when he's driving the car.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Something that I kind of want to segue into is, and this is in the chapter on Hesed, our relational glue. Our brains draw life from our strongest relational attachments to grow our character and develop our identity. Who we love shapes who we are. Character formation is the central task of the church, and our brains are designed to use our attachments to form our character. So can you unpack that a bit, Michael, about first of all, what is Hesed? Because it said Hesed describes something we find in the brain and in the Bible, and it's all about relational attachments in growing our character.
Yes. This is one of those things, too, that we've all seen but haven't had any explanation for it, so maybe we glossed over it. The classic example is in John 15 when Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches. As long as you remain in me, what is a branch? How is a branch connected to a vine? It's attached. It's not kind of hovering around the vine and trying to be as close or trying to think the vine is close. It's actually, it's attached. Our relationship with Jesus is very, very much an attachment. And so Jim and Marcus Warner, who used to teach Hebrew, I think, they went and looking through the Old Testament and they came across the Hebrew word chesed as being one of the strongest words that really carried the essence of attachment. Permanent bond, relational bond, that's like a family level bond. Our family level bonds are usually, except in extremely difficult circumstances, our family bonds are permanent bonds. Like my sisters will be my sisters till the day I die. They're not come and go relationships like we have so often with, like coworkers we work with, and then we get a job and then we never see them again. That is not Hesed. Hesed is a family member. Even if you do separate, even if a good friend moves to the East Coast, we, say we get together 10 years later, it's almost like we're never apart because of that Hesed bond. There's this family level.
Yeah.
And that's really where we need to point the church. Without that Hesed bond, it functions very much like a firewall into the rest of our character. Our character doesn't change outside of that Hesed bond much. When you have a Hesed bond, especially when you have it with someone who's more mature than you are, then their maturity through that bond starts flowing into me as I see them live a life, as I see him or her doing things that I cannot currently do relationally. Like I remember, once I saw one of the members of our community who was one of the staff members who had several small children, and his kid jammed a pencil into the VCR. This is back when he had tape recorders for movies, He did something.
What's that?
And he saw that and he bent down, looked at his son and said, I've told you not to do that. And I don't want to discipline you because that makes me sad too. So please don't put any more pencils or anything in this machine. It's delicate. This is part of what something our family enjoys at night, and you would be hurting that. So please don't do that anymore. But he did it in just this connecting, kind way, but also set, a good boundary for the kid to learn. And my family bringing up was very much just reactionary. There would have been an explosion. What are you doing that? Things like that. And when I saw him act that way, it was almost like my brain was going beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, and rewiring itself, right? And so this is very much how character is formed. It's formed through us seeing another person live in a way that's more mature than we were. And then they can also share it virtually. If we're not there for these experiences, they can tell stories in a way that actually takes our neurosystem on a ride. And it's almost as though we were there when it happened. That's one of the things we train people on, is how to tell these full brain stories that take my neurosystem on a ride and those build emotional capacity as we see people handle difficult situations that, that I would have lost my mind in, but I see this man or I see this woman handling it very much like Jesus would handle it. Well, they just downloaded their brain to me, a little bit of their brain to me by me being able to see that or hear the story of it.
Yeah. Wow.
Can that act in the opposite too, as far as can you have Hesed with not so healthy people, or is that word only regards to like a healthy community, like you're talking about, Michael, and watching people that are more mature than us?
Well, from the viewpoint of the brain, no, attachment can be very negative as well. That's what cults do. Sects, gangs have very high Hesed, a type of Hesed, but that doesn't mean That doesn't mean that their hesed is aligned with Jesus and with what we would call group identity, that aligns with his kingdom. So hesed is very important. It's the firewall into our character, but hesed alone is not enough. Joy and hesed are absolutely the starting places, but you can't just stop with joy and hesed, because then it's like fertilizer. You can start growing really big weeds if you have a lot of good fertilizer. You need other things as well that correct. That's where the second half of the book, where we talk about group identity, which really defines what kind of people are we? How do we act in life in certain situations? How do we act when our little kid shoves a pencil in the VCR and almost breaks something, that maybe we don't have the money to replace? Well, I need to see that. That's group identity. We're people that act, that are slow to become angry, and we always treat everyone with kindness, but we also will correct each other very kindly so that we grow into the image of Christ. We need to build this group identity, and then we also need to learn and be trained. How do we correct each other in a way that's healthy?
Yeah,
that's
so
not
important.
toxic. It's not toxic, and that's not cruel, but also doesn't give the person a pass. That isn't this kind of, sugary, too nice Christianity, which nobody ever grows in that.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Well, and Michael, you had shared talking about you sharing weaknesses with others and that being a safe place. So how is that different from the traditional, what we understand as accountability? Like I need an accountability partner, and that word, can be probably described different ways, but how do we differentiate the traditional, maybe understanding of what accountability is with sharing weaknesses with one another and seeing the tenderness? And I know that, Jim talks about that Jesus is tender with our weaknesses, and we need to be that for each other too. But can you just share what that even means, and how is that different from the traditional view of accountability?
Yeah, accountability kind of has the underlying, not directly stated, but the underlying assumption that it's largely has to do with willpower. So like let's say I have like a porn addiction problem, and then I come to a friend and I'm going to say, well, yeah, I need you to keep me accountable. So that means every time I look at porn, I have to go meet with this person and tell them what I did. Right. Now that's not a bad thing, but it's the problem with it is it's too late. Our willpower will come online much later than my character will come out. The character that is coming out will be instantaneous. And even if I don't actually look at porn, if I have this wave of desire that wants to do it, and then I kind of stop myself, that's good. That's cleaning up. But how about changing that initial wave? So that I here's how Dallas Willard defined spiritual maturity, is when we easily and naturally do what Jesus would do, think the way Jesus would think, say what Jesus would say if he were in my shoes right now. So accountability is good. It's really, it's too little. What I would need then, with what we're talking about attachment, I need to attach to another man, maybe even a man who used to have this porn problem, but now who doesn't have it at all. And he needs to start sharing stories of how he aligned his inner character with Jesus through both successes and failures, how he would have acted when he didn't act like Jesus and how he did act like Jesus. Those stories, if they're told the proper way, will take my neurological system on a ride. And over time, that will change me it'll feel spontaneous. So that I just all of a sudden I'm in a situation where I would have been tempted, and I'm just like, oh, I don't want to do that. That's not even who I am. Almost I have disgust, right? Yeah. Something that would have attracted me becomes disgust. Boom, you've spontaneously changed your character, but that's done largely through chesed, with a more mature community.
Yeah. What do people do if they don't have this more mature community?
Well, that is the $10,000 question now, isn't it?
Maybe the $1 million question.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
worth a lot more than that.
And that's why it's hard for counselors who do. If you go to a counselor for an addiction problem and they'll give you things, but really addiction, we're going back to attachment pain. Any addiction really strongly is evidence of deep attachment pain.
Yeah.
And you're trying to stop the pain, by having that extra glass of wine at night after dinner, or, binging on 3 more episodes of Netflix, or just going online and buying a couple things that give you a rush on Amazon. as well as the, more clear addictions. And you really need, a loving community to get you out. A lot of times, even with AA, there's a lot of success rate until the person then is better and they get out of AA, and then they're in another community. They lose a lot of attachment, and then they go back into their addiction because it really needs the community.
Yeah.
And so again, churches are really the ideal place if we take the other half of church seriously. They're ideal places for healing addictions because it has the whole package. Maybe some one-on-one counseling is necessary, but then sending people back into a community of people who get it, who understand how this works. And so, I had so much just spontaneous healing in my community as a sophomore and junior in college, just from being in this deeply connected community without even knowing what was happening. Boom, I would just start changing.
Wow.
And I think what I was doing, as Jim Wilder would say, I was slowly downloading the maturity of the people around me, the relational and emotional maturity of the people around me, as I saw them living a better life.
Which is why it's really important to choose well who is around you and who you're allowing to rub off on you. But it's also an encouragement or a challenge to become a healthy person for others to be around, so that it has to go both ways, because you need to be around healthy people to get healthy, but you want to also be healthy for others, which is why this whole discipleship journey and becoming like Jesus requires us to have people that are in front of us on the journey and people that are behind us on the journey, so that we are really a river and not a pond. We're taking in and we're giving out, and being able to have that kind of connection and attachment with other healthy people, and so that we can become that. And for a discipleship model in a church, that sounds like that would be the ticket, right?
That would be the discipleship greenhouse. When you're building joy and hesed, you're building a good group identity, you're correcting each other, but you're in an environment where there's people who are farther down the road than you, and there are people on the other side that aren't as far down the road as you. That is like it's the sweet spot that we need to aim our churches at. That's really, and then things just start happening too. As long as you have good eldership that's keeping things safe. And, elders I'm not talking about the elder board on a church or anything. I'm talking about elder level maturity. People are ones who are constantly looking at people for maturity and where their lack might be. And then they would bless them with lots of good stories, the right kind of stories they need to hear at that time. They're the ones that are keeping people safe. It's dangerous when you build hesed. It can turn romantic, it can turn sexual. And so you need good, wise eldership, keeping it safe and non-sexual, and keeping it instead very, very, nothing is secret in that sense. And we're keeping it open. And there's just some wisdom that needs to happen with the most mature people, almost being the parents of the community. That's what an elder really does, is they parent the whole community, and they're making sure that things are safe and healthy and not getting weird either.
Yes. Yeah. And that's why we talk about family bonds, like having 3 instead of pairs.
Correct.
In building that for that same reason.
Yeah, exactly. That's a better way to build joy, unless you can do it with a brother, sister, very close friend, spouse, child. Then it's better to build joy in groups of 3 or more and things like that. There's just kind of some basic wisdom.
Sure.
And right now we can do this, I'm hoping and assuming, and we talked to Jim about this a little bit, that we can even do this on Zoom. We can do this virtually because of the separation that people are experiencing physically, not able to go to church, et cetera. And we know that it's not as, we can't make the eye contact, but we can create this hesed attachment even via Zoom. Do you agree with that, Michael, that we could do this virtually?
Well, I'm not the neuroscience expert, but I've heard what Jim has said. He says it's very hard to develop or to initiate hesed if you don't have it already with people online, because the slight delay is slower than our brain is running. And so our brain is confused because I can't get the nonverbal 1/6 of a second feedback fast enough for me to then react. And so it's hard to do if you don't already have an established hesed relationship. But if I'm on a Zoom call, for example, with someone that I already have a deep bonding with, then my brain can use the memory of what I know to be true about us to fill in the gaps. So, but with a brand new stranger, it's hard to build too much hesed. It's just not ideal, but it's probably better than nothing, because you still have voice tone. The eye and facial feedback will be kind of thrown off, and you also can't really look at someone eye to eye online, so you don't have that, and that is like the most powerful channel. But you do have voice tone, and voice tone is still very powerful. It's just not quite as big as your face and your eyes for building joy.
Yeah, and just another window into our podcast world. Right now, we've been having the bulk of this conversation with the cameras off, which has been, it creates more of a challenge, but we were having a difficulty with the Wi-Fi, and the call was hanging up so much with audio and everything that we turned off the camera, and we're still having this conversation, but it's not nearly as wonderful and beautiful as if we were able to see each other right now. And then you've got people who are listening and they never see us, but it's helpful when you're having the interview itself to have that conversation with video. And I think what you were just saying is like, it's not ideal and it's better than nothing. But I think that's the pain that is deep in my heart, knowing the damage that is being caused by the separation that has been forced on us because of the current situation. And if you're listening to this somewhere in the future, 2020 as well as we do now, that it's been a very difficult, challenging year with so many things going on. But the relational disconnect, we really have to work a lot harder for it. And it's that's a sad place, but I am excited about what you've written in the book. I love what Jim is teaching and what you're communicating in a very beautiful, easily accessible way in the other half of church. And we're really grateful that you wrote it and that we can have this now and be intentional to the best that we can, hopefully in person for those that are in places that are maybe returning to a little bit more connection option. But then there are some that are still in areas that are very locked down. And but there are some ways that, especially sharing those joy stories and communicating. And thank you for unpacking that. The sensory way that we connect with a memory is really important in the sharing, because it's a mutual brain exchange.
Yeah. And Michael, I've already, I think like at the beginning of the podcast, I said, I've already shared this book with some leaders of churches, saying that, we're asking, how do we do what you're talking about? And I think the first step could be buying this book, because there's exercises in the back of each chapter. I've already I'm going through this with the journey group that I lead. And so we've been doing the exercises, maybe not the eye contact ones, but certainly sharing joy and appreciation. And because the importance of this is, just let me kind of wrap things up here with something you wrote. It said, our attachment to Jesus produces obedience. In order to fulfill the Great Commission, both scripture and brain science emphasize that we must start by building joyful Hesed attachments. We must convert to a new model of discipleship, a Hesed model where relationships are in the center of everything.
Yeah.
And that's really what we've been talking about. But we can get some help with this book. And there's simple, practical tools. And I'm not a salesperson, but I really want to encourage, and this podcast wasn't like we just got to boost Michael's sales of this book. It was about looking at it, unpacking what's in it, because it is so transformative if we apply these tools within our relationships and our churches and our families and friends. And so I just want to say, please go get the book, you guys. But Michael, just before we wrap things up, any other closing thoughts that you want to share with our listeners?
Well, I think it's a great thing to mention the journey groups you're doing as a study group. I'm starting a study group here in Boulder with about 10 friends going through the other half as well. And I work for Life Model Works, which is at lifemodelworks.org. And we'll be offering also some church consulting around this if you need it, both online and in person, and some classes similar to the journey group. So there's a lot of offerings out there if you need some help. But I agree with you. A good first step is to read the book and then come to come to Kathy and Melinda, come to me for help, and we'll give you what we can give you. But, these are the discussions we want to be having. So this is the exciting part. These very discussions we've had today, these are where we want to start. And pretty soon, and ask that God would guide our path, because this is a path that needs to be, illumined by Him.
Exactly. I love that there's all these different resources, and thank God that there isn't just one place that people can go, because I think everyone needs to learn this so that it's multiplied. There's a multiplication process here. And that one thing that we're excited about with our own face-to-face heart healing network is building this Hesed. What does this look like? Learning and growing together. And, we're going to be using this book as kind of a textbook.
Yeah.
So as a model, like what can this look like even in groups that are meeting virtually and doing the best that we can in that regard. But thank you so much, Michael. We're just absolutely grateful. And when you said yes, I was like, oh, I've got to get this guy on a podcast. I mean,
yes,
we have to. It so goes along with what we're developing in our network and what we're teaching. And so thank you. Thank you for pressing through, Michael. We've taken way more of your time than we said because of the technical difficulties that people can't see, that we moved 3 times trying to move closer to the router. It's like we need to sit on top of it or something.
Yes.
But thank you for maintaining your joy in the midst of that, Michael.
We all stayed relational, so that was a win.
Yeah.
In the midst of all that.
Thank you, Kathy and Melinda. And I agree with you when you said when we turned our video off, I could feel the joy bump down a little bit. So that's just evidence of what we've been talking about. There we go.
We're turning it back on now. We were just trying to make the audio better, but it did affect everything.
Well, thank you, Michael, so much for your time and your knowledge and experience, and just sitting here. People won't be able to see you, but you seem like a super laid back, easygoing, just enjoyable to be around person. And it's been a joy and a delight. Great. And you've stayed cool, even though we've had all these technical difficulties. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for your time today.
Well, I love being around people who are hungry for this, hungry for change, and hungry to spread it to other people. So I think, to me, this is kind of my happy place. So thank you for inviting me in.
So I do want to say, I know I mentioned it in the interview, that when we turned the camera off because we were having so much difficulty with the Wi-Fi, there was a shift. So it was actually a real life illustration of what we've been talking about in this interview with Michael and what the other half of church is about, because it really did affect the level. And then right after we were finishing and closing out, we turned the cameras back on, and it was there's a difference. There's a difference.
Even
and
though,
this is just virtual.
Right. Even though it's Zoom, still being able to see his face and go, okay, this is the context for this conversation where I can see his face. And, it was wonderful to hear his voice, but even if there's any kind of pauses, is he still there? And that was even harder technologically, and being able to see, someone looking down or thinking, and we couldn't see that, but it makes us work harder and listen more. But this is powerful, and let us know what you're thinking. We love hearing from you and how you can put this into practice. And that's what we're about. And, that's why he was saying he loves meeting people that are doing this. And we want to train you guys to do this. It's not just about, face-to-face ministries. It's about, we are training and equipping you. We all can do this. It doesn't take a PhD or even an MDiv. It doesn't take a master's degree or even a bachelor's degree for that matter. This is all of us.
This is basic discipleship.
It is. And that's what we're about. And we'd love to have you join us so that we can do this together, fulfilling the Great Commission of making disciples of all nations.
Face-to-face Heart Healing Network. Come on. And we are excited to continue the journey with you. Thank you for being part of our family, our virtual family. And for those of you who are hearing about us on podcast and wonder if we're really relational people and what we're really like, come on and join us in the Face-to-Face Heart Healing Network and be part of some of the other things that we're making available there. We'd really love to have you be with us on the journey. And for those of you who are listening who are already in the network, We love you guys. Thank you so much for jumping in.
We do.
We love all of our listeners. We really do. But it's exciting to be able to build relationship with people more directly rather than just, this is a one-sided conversation. Melinda and I are here together. We're talking to each other, but it's a one-sided conversation. And once you get into the network, it's a two-sided conversation.
Yeah. And
we invite you into that. We invite you into that. So thanks for joining us. And we will see you soon. And
see you in the Face-to-Face Heart Healing Network.
There you go. Have a great day, y'all.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Face-to-Face Ministries podcast. And to be sure not to miss any future episodes, please subscribe.
And to help us get the word out, please share this podcast with your friends. Give us a 5-star rating and leave us a brief review. More content is coming your way.
Thank you so much for listening.